Yes, I've got a little bit of a cold, but I feel fine. It's really just my voice is a bit froggy. Well, my friends, this week we lost an important leader for Baltimore, for Maryland, and for the United States. Elijah Cummings was our voice in Congress, a voice for justice and a voice for action. Bishop Sutton said in a statement about Cummings, just like his namesake, Elijah the prophet in the Old Testament, Congressman Cummings was a prophetic voice for justice, mercy, and compassion. Voices like his are so important in our political life. Now, certainly other voices will emerge to help fill the void, but his voice will be sorely missed. A friend of mine from seminary shared this quote of Elijah Cummings, and I feel like it ties in nicely with our Hebrew scripture today. Cummings said, "Every time something bad happens to me, I don't ask the question, why did it happen to me? I ask the question, why did it happen for me? Why did it happen for me?" Elijah Cummings knew that struggle was a part of life. And from our struggles we learn and we grow. And to take it a step further, we should engage in the struggles that come our way and not try to avoid them. Struggle and faith go together. And if we avoid the things that cause us discomfort and cause us to wrestle with our worldview, well, we give away a chance to grow, often a chance to grow deeper in our faith. And struggle and growth is the theme of our first reading today, Jacob wrestling with God. The story is one of the most important stories in all of the Hebrew scriptures, yet I have to tell you the truth, when I first heard it, I kind of dismissed it. I hadn't yet been taught to read these stories metaphorically, and if you try to read this story literally, you immediately run into several problems. So at first I kind of put this story in the category of, the same category as Noah and the ark. It's a nice story, but it couldn't possibly have happened that way. Well, but when you look at this story metaphorically, there are some really wonderful things to notice. Things to notice both about God and also about God's people, us. Because our desire to learn more about God and our desire to learn, get closer to God can often feel like a wrestling match, can't it? Well, let me remind you of a little of the backstory, what comes before this story of Jacob today. And let's go back to Abraham. Abraham was Jacob's grandfather. He's that one who was unquestioningly obeyed the commandments of God. He was very faithful, very devout, and God promised him that he would be the patriarch of a vast nation. And this was in light of the fact that he and his wife Sarah had no children and were long past childbearing age. Well, miraculously they do have a child, and they name him Isaac. And Isaac has two sons, Esau and Jacob. Now, Jacob, we learn, he's a pretty slippery character. He tricks his father Isaac into giving him the family's inheritance when by right it belonged to his older brother Esau. And then after tricking Isaac, Jacob flees in fear of his brother's wrath. And then along his journey, he receives this special revelation from God. He sees in a dream a ladder reaching up into heaven. And God promises Jacob lands and numerous offspring that would prove to be a blessing to the entire earth. And that is what comes to pass. Many years pass, and Jacob prospers, but he continues to be concerned. He's concerned about his brother Esau. Then word comes to Jacob that Esau is coming to meet him, and he's bringing 400 men with him. And that is when we get the story that we heard today. Jacob sends his family away with everything that he had to try to protect them. And then Jacob waits. He waits all alone for Esau to arrive. But then something interesting happens. It's not an army that confronts Jacob, but instead, it's a single mysterious man who shows up in the darkness. And we're not told who this man is, but I imagine Jacob thought it must be Esau. We're told that they wrestle for a long time in the darkness, and just as the sun is about to break the horizon, the man says to Jacob, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob says, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." That's an interesting tactic. You know, Jacob is no dummy. He has survived all this time by using his wits, and again he holds on with all of his strength in order for this conflict to turn into a blessing. The man says, "What is your name?" "I'm Jacob." The man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but rather Israel." And then the man says, "You have striven with God and with humans, and you have prevailed." And Jacob seems confused by this, so he says, "Well, who are you?" But the man says, "Why is it that you ask my name?" I feel like he's saying, "Come on, you know who I am." And that is when the blessing comes. And then Jacob says, "I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." And then the sun rose upon him, and a new day had dawned. This story reminds us that often when we work our way through a struggle, the result can be a blessing. Jacob, he holds tight until that blessing comes. His tenacity, his perseverance, his willingness to work through the struggle yields this blessing. My friends, this is how the stewardship journey works too. Struggling with money is one of the most difficult things that we face. And it has been this way since the beginning of time. We worry more about money than almost anything else in our lives except perhaps our own health. And part of it is that we have a survival instinct. We yearn to live as long and as well as we can, and we trick ourselves into thinking that having plenty of money will make that possible. And this is a struggle that we all face. If we give our money away, we worry that we won't have it when we need it. It's very normal, and it's an understandable concern. But I want to persuade you that the more we learn to give away our money, the richer our lives become. I like to say, don't give until it hurts, give until it feels good. It is a paradox. It is a paradox of our faith journey as it concerns money. If when you're writing that check to the cathedral each month, you feel resentment or anxiety, well, my friends, then you're doing it wrong. About 25 years ago, when Sally and I joined Grace Episcopal Church in Norwalk, Connecticut, we started to drop some money in the offering plate each Sunday. You know, we'd look in our wallets and we'd pull out a $10 or a $20 bill and we'd add it to the basket. And if we looked in our wallets and we didn't have any cash, which was a common occurrence, we'd say, well, you know, next time. We'll get that next time. Well, then stewardship season came around, and the rector asked us to make a pledge for the next year. He encouraged us to think hard about how important the church was to us, and then to make a plan to give accordingly. And he was the first person to teach me about the concept of tithing, giving 10% away to charity. Well, after a fair amount of procrastinating, read that, struggling, Sally and I sat down together at our computer and we crunched the numbers. We would use our computer to keep track of our money. We had a pretty good idea of how much money we earned and how much money we spent. Well, we saw that what we were giving to the church and to other charities at that time was about 0.5%. And that surprised us. And we also learned that as we looked at the numbers, we were spending much more money on cable television than we were donating to charity. And that, my friends, was a wake-up call. We both knew that church was much more important to us than television. But our actual giving did not, reflect our priorities. So we decided to raise our giving the next year and to pledge 1% to the church. So that amounted to doubling our giving that next year. And listen, we were nervous about doing it. We weren't swimming in money. We had just bought our first house. We had a mortgage. We had a newborn baby. But we took a risk, and we made a pledge. And when stewardship season rolled around again, and friends, if you're new to this, stewardship season rolls around every year. Well, when it rolled around again, we noticed that we hadn't missed that money that we were giving away. We hadn't noticed it at all. And so the next year we decided to double our pledge again to 2%. And then the same thing happened. Everything worked out. We didn't go broke. In fact, the more we learned to give away, the less we worried about our money. And so giving away our money started to feel good. And this is how the struggle with money works. This is how the struggle of faith works. If we take some time to work through it. But like the story of Jacob, if we wrestle with it long enough, that struggle can really turn into a blessing. So I now pledge 10% of my income to the church and to other charities. And my friends, it feels very good. It feels very good. Now, I'm aware that some of you have been struggling with how to respond to our Open Doors, Open Hearts initiative. And it's a normal reaction. We have put forth an ambitious idea. But what we believe we will be able to do will be a blessing to this community and to our city. But I have to be honest with you, I've had several sleepless nights worrying about how you're going to respond. Are we doing a good enough job explaining the aspirations and the goals? Will people get excited about the possibilities for the future? So my personal wrestling match has a lot to do with making sure that we are putting our best foot forward, because I love this church and I want us to grow. So if you are feeling unsettled by this new initiative, may I ask you to please lean into your struggle. Perhaps you could ask, why is this happening for me? Open your heart, open your door to have a conversation. And if you've already turned down a meeting request, please reconsider. Because I assure you that we aren't going to be putting you on the spot. And I promise you that all that we want to do is explain our aspirations and our goals and then we will leave it to you to decide if you want to make a gift to support this work. There is no doubt this is an important thing that we are asking you to do. It's understandable that you might be skeptical. And yes, Open Doors, Open Hearts is an ambitious project, but with your help, it is definitely attainable. So I thank you. I thank you for your prayerful consideration, both for pledging for next year and also for the capital campaign for the next 3 years. And so I want to conclude by getting back to Jacob's story, because what we don't hear in the passage today is what happens right after the wrestling match concludes. Because Jacob's brother Esau does arrive. But Esau doesn't come to kill Jacob. Rather, he comes to reconcile and to reunite with his long-lost brother. You see, the blessing that Jacob receives after his wrestling match with God is the restoration of his family. Struggle turns into blessing. And that blessing is filled with huge opportunities. Amen.